It's time to pull those belts tight, race fans. The front stretch is coming at you, presented by Joe's Karting in Council Bluffs. Now, here's Dan Taylor and Dirk Houston.
Well, good morning to you, race fans, and welcome to the front stretch, presented by Joe's Karting in Council Bluffs, online at joeskarting.com. Head over to the newly renovated joeskarting.com. Actually, I think I've been saying newly renovated for about a year now. But,
pretty close.
It's one of those really nice sites. There's some sites that you go to that they're just hard to navigate, but this is just laid out very evenly stacked. You just keep scrolling down, and you're going to get how-to videos. You're going to get hours, prices, discount possibilities, group ratings, group outings, all that fun stuff.
On this side of the river, we call that user-friendly.
That's right, user-friendly. That's a good way to put it. I'll add that word to my dictionary. A lot of show to get to you today. We'd originally planned to talk to Steve Kosiski, or air the interview we did with Steve Kosiski about track prep, owning a track, being a former driver and head of the track prep crew. But because of the announcement earlier this week with Home Pride Motorsports switching to Harris Chassis and a cooperation between the two, we've decided to move Steve to next week. And in turn number one, we're going to talk a little bit of NASCAR news and notes. There's a couple of things that have happened in the new year, but not much. So turn one's not going to be very long. Turn number two, we're going to talk with Lou Cochran, who is the owner of Home Pride Companies and the head of Home Pride Motorsports, and we're going to talk to him about that addition to their shop and switching chassis and all that kind of fun stuff as far as Jesse Sobbing is concerned in the USTMS. We'll also get into what's going on with Dennis Cook, who is one of his sponsors in the 45 Sport Modified at I-80 Speedway, and I think Shelby County he also races. And then what's going on with Jack Dover as far as his 360 efforts? Is he going to stay with the 360? He's going to try to go 410? Because a little bit of a side note and something we'll try to get into is dirt season kind of ramps up a little bit, but that National Sprint League 360 series kind of seems like it's on shaky ground right now.
Yeah, well, we maybe need to get a hold of somebody over there at the NSL and see what we can find out.
I've tried a couple of times, and all I've got is, Dan, you know as much as I know.
Yeah,
so I think but anyways, like I said, that's the time for another show. And then in turns 3 and 4, we're going to sit down with Doug Wolfgang. He's going to be joining us on the show for the second straight year, but instead of being the featured guest as a part of the Legends of the Dirt series, Doug's going to come on and talk to him about his former car owner. It's somebody he made a lot of hay with and ended up in victory lane a lot with, Bob Trostle, who we lost later in the year last year in 2015. So we'll talk to Doug about his time with Bob Trostle and kind of get behind the scenes with the wily mechanic that made so much noise in the sprint world, and really what I kind of feel like, reading a little bit of history, it feels like Bob is a big reason why sprint racing is such a big thing in Australia, that Bob really took sprint car down there as far as Americans were concerned in the mid 80s, and then brought Australians into the United States in the late 90s and turn of the 2000s, and really started to make a lot of work with getting that bridge gapped, and now it's a nice haven while it's freezing outside for a lot of those racers to go and have a good time down in the South.
Yeah, well, Shane Carson touched on that when we talked with him, that him and Bob had gone down there a little bit and kind of got that deal started. And Shane loved going over there and said when they first went that they were just head and shoulders above everybody over there. But then the guys over there started buying chassis from Bob and, caught up in a big hurry.
Indeed, and like you kind of hit on it there, and Shane talked about, and I'm sure Doug will talk about, a big contributor to the sprint world, which was Bob Trostle. So that'll be turns 3 and 4. And turn number 1, like I said, we're going to do a little NASCAR news and notes, and something that I think you're going to be able to help me out with quite a bit. Correct me if I'm wrong. Were you ever at Kentucky Speedway, or was your time with the truck series over before that jumped on the series?
Oh no, I'd been at Kentucky several times.
Okay.
One night when they had tornado warnings and stuff, that tornado came within just a couple miles of the track, was a little spooky because there's no place to hide at a racetrack.
What are the garages like there? Are they're concrete garages, but still?
It's garages at most of the tracks are basically a big tin shed.
Yeah.
They're well constructed, but it's still, it isn't going to do anything in the case of a tornado.
You'd rather be in a basement in your home rather than...
Oh, yeah. Obviously, anywhere underground. You can go stand in the big series hauler, and the wind's going to toss that and flop it wherever. You can go into the tunnel, the foot tunnel that goes underneath the track, but that's going to fill up with water and drown you.
Yeah.
There's just no place to go. Probably the safest place to go would be to put a helmet on and strap into one of the race vehicles.
That's true.
Wind tosses them around, you're not going to get hurt.
Kentucky announced earlier this week that it's undertaken a comprehensive renovation of its racing surface, which is going to be highlighted by increased banking in Turn 1 and 2, and further includes drainage improvements, additional safer barriers, and repaving the entire 1.5-mile tri-oval track. Work began and will be completed before this year's NASCAR triple header in July. Modifying Turns 1 and 2 will present an exciting challenge to the drivers while addressing issues of the track surface. And you were talking about that before we got the show kicked off. That's probably those bumps in Turns 1 and 2.
Yeah, that's something that's been there since the track started. And as we were also talking before the show started, I'm not a big fan of having every racetrack resurfaced every 10 years,
I don't think the track presidents are either, because that's a hefty bill.
Oh, it really is. And, so what the tires are wearing a little bit, that just adds more excitement to the race. Makes that driver use all of his skill instead of part of it. And these guys, Carl Edwards and Kyle Busch and stuff, you listen to them talk, they love these tracks with character.
Yeah.
Everybody loves going to Darlington, but, that track's been crazy on tires for years.
To me, looking at this, it kind of feels like they were wanting to address issues with Turns 1 and 2, the bumps, which I kind of feel like the bumps are what gives this thing a lot of character. We talk about bumps, and the first track I think of, probably because I'm a little bit of a homer, is Iowa Speedway. They don't really say bumps. They say this track's got character to it, and drivers really have to be careful and know exactly where those bumps are, because your car can get loose real quick and into the wall at a place like Iowa Speedway. I'm kind of surprised that they're addressing that issue at Kentucky.
Well, a bigger track, obviously, so more speed involved.
Yep.
And
good point.
It's to me, it's just part of the track. Let them race on it, and if they can't run there and keep the car the way they want it, then they got to run a lane or two higher.
Yeah.
That's all racing.
I completely agree with you, but it kind of feels to me, I think I was starting to get to it, but I got a little sidetracked, that it feels like they're trying to fix Turns 1 and 2, and while they were at it, they said, well, it'd just be easier if we just went ahead and repaved the whole track while we were at it.
Well,
which, take a note from, was it Bristol, that they repaved their track, and then for 3-4 years, they did everything to that surface, try to bring back the old racing.
Yeah, and people... Even the drivers still aren't real happy with Bristol, and you can tell the attendance has gone clear down because it's just not what it used to be. It
feels like it's getting back there, though, as far as Bristol is concerned. They've gotten a little bit closer.
Well, yeah, but they keep working at it. They had it. Why'd they change it? If it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Yeah, well, that seems to be a problem with some of these
And
things.
Anybody that hasn't been to Kentucky Speedway and would like a race to try and go to, it's not all that far. It's about 40 miles back this way from Cincinnati. If you fly into Cincinnati, their airport's actually in Kentucky, in Florence, Kentucky.
No kidding.
And it's about a 40-mile drive from Florence to the racetrack. The racetrack's located in Sparta. If you fly into Lexington, Kentucky, it's about 40 miles the other way. It's just in between those two big cities. It is right next to the interstate. I think it's probably closer to the interstate than I-80 is to Interstate 80. I mean, it's right next to the interstate.
Wow.
And like I said, it's a great facility, very fan-friendly. Grandstands are built up on a hill like they are in Kansas. It's a good place to watch a race, and I would recommend going to that Speedway if you want to try something different than Kansas City. Like I said, it's a full day's drive to get there. Like going to Texas Motor Speedway is a full day. Chicago is
make a weekend out of it. Have a good vacation. Just kind of get away, get out of the Midwest, and well, as far out of the Midwest as Kentucky Speedway gets you, but
do yourself a favor and don't plan on traveling after the race is over on Sunday night. Give yourself a day for a rain out or something, because they'll run the race first things Monday morning if it rains out on Sunday for any reason.
Yeah.
So
on the flip side of that repave coin, Atlanta Motor Speedway announced back in November via their Twitter page, a repave has been looked into, but at this time there are no plans to do so. It looks like Atlanta Motor Speedway is the oldest surface on the NASCAR circuit right now. 18 years old, that concrete is. They've been blessed with mild Georgia winters and a thorough maintenance program that has kept the track, that has been able to keep the track's longevity going. So it sounds like Atlanta's going to stick with what they've got, which is going to be a very rough surface that eats away at the tires pretty quickly and puts the driving in the driver's hands, which is something you were just touching on. You really want more of these tracks to do.
Well, exactly, and the racing there's great. It's not like we watch some boring races, even though it's another one of the 1.5-mile cookie cutter tracks. but the racing there is always good and it's
Yeah.
always fast.
Now, it was Darlington that lost the race to Kansas, or was it Atlanta that lost their race to Kansas?
Atlanta.
It was-
Darlington
okay.
had lost their race to California a few
Okay.
years ago, and they
Got it.
bounced that race around a few times.
Got it. Moving on down the line for NASCAR news and notes, Darian Grubb was the odd man out when Joe Gibbs Racing made some crew chief changes, and now Darian has landed back at his old home. He will now be the, let me try to find it pretty quickly. He's going to be the,
Back
I
at
can't
Hendricks.
I can't think of the exact title, but he's going to be in charge of helping develop the cars and build them at the shop at race day, which is
Competition
something.
development or some title
Yeah.
they gave him. But yeah, he's back at Hendrick.
So good for him. He landed at a good home, which I think Darian's a talented man. I'm just not entirely sure that crew chiefing is his forte. He's good, but let's look back at his history. He won the Daytona 500 with Jimmy Johnson when he was filling in for Chad Knaus when Chad got suspended. And I'm sorry, I'm not trying to rip anybody down here, but the Daytona 500 isn't necessarily a crew chief laden race. It's not a race that the crew chief has to really make sure he's got everything buttoned up. He gives the guy a pretty good car, and then it's up to the driver and circumstances to win the race.
Well, they've still got to plan out all the pit road strategy and everything else, and the tire usage and everything. There's a lot that goes on that, people don't understand, what the crew chief actually does.
Then he goes and wins a championship with Tony Stewart, but remember, they really didn't do much until Chicagoland when that chase started, and they won 5 races, and the reason why he ended up tying with Carl Edwards at the end of that championship after winning 5 races was because he didn't really do much the other 5 races of those, and he really suffered and had to win the other half of the races. He moved over to Joe Gibbs Racing and really wasn't able to find much. Maybe it was a Toyota thing. Maybe it was just a fit thing. We've seen it with a lot of these guys. Joey Logano, moving from Joe Gibbs Racing over to Penske, has found a lot of success in the Penske cars. So maybe this will be the big change that he needs to kind of reset his career and get going.
Well, he's not going to be on top of the pit box anymore, so you really can't compare to what he's going to be doing now to what he's been doing.
That's going to do it for us in turn number 1. We're going to take a break. We'll come back in turn number 2. Luke Cochran of Home Pride Motorsports just around the corner to talk Jesse Sobbing racing news. They're pairing up with Harris Chassis. We'll find out more on the front stretch.
Hey, Dan, guess what?
Yes.
6 more weeks to Daytona.
Oh, 6 more Sundays. We'll be back here on the front stretch.
Joe's Karting in Council Bluffs has taken a page out of IMCA's rulebook and gone crate. These brand new low-emission engines will still have you white-knuckling it all through the Metro's fastest indoor facility. Joe's Karting is now friendly for all skill levels with their brand new Honda-powered engines. It's time to get to Joe's today and find out what drivers like Jack Dover, Shaylee Bate, and Andrew Kosiski have known for years. Located in Council Bluffs and online at joeskarting.com. That's karting with a K.
This is Andrew from Kosiski Auto Parts. Kosiski Auto Parts is an insurance-quality used parts supplier that can match your foreign or domestic car or truck needs. If you have a damaged or broke-down car or truck, we guarantee a clean and quality part in next-day fashion. Kosiski Auto Parts, your neighborhood premium recycled parts supplier. Call any Kosiski Auto Parts salesman today by dialing 402-731-4592 or visit us at 5040 I Street in Omaha. Kosiski Auto Parts, our quality used parts will match your car or truck's needs.
We're hooked up in turn 2 and still showing the green flag on the front stretch.
Heading into turn number 2 here on the front stretch, and continuing here on January 10th, we're heading over to the phone lines to talk to a friend of the front stretch and somebody I think I can call a friend. I don't know. He's been on my roof, he's been in my attic, and he's given me advice. How you doing today, Luke Cochran?
Not too bad.
It's good to have you on the show again. You guys had a little bit of an announcement earlier this week, so I wanted to get you on to talk about that announcement. Sounds like you guys are going to be moving chassis manufacturers and have lined up a really good developmental deal with Harris Chassis.
That's exactly correct. We're their new, I guess what you would call Western Iowa, Eastern Nebraska dealer also.
So you guys are going to be selling chassis for them too then?
That's the grand plan. We going to be in charge of research and development to get them back a brand name in the open modified USMTS type series. We're going to field 2 cars for that, a weekly A mod and a B mod to run specials.
Oh, really?
So 4 cars.
Now, are you having another driver besides Jesse, or just going to have 2 cars always available for Jesse?
Yep. All the cars are going to be available for Jesse. The B mod may be campaigned a little bit by another driver. I don't want to name that just yet. kind of once in a while. But ultimately, what I've made a notice of, and when I talked to Kyle Brown about this situation in the first place, was that there's about 3-to-1 B mods, A mods out there. So it's only natural for these promoters to start having some big money paying B mod shows. And sure enough, that's what's happening. Yeah. So we're gonna try to take advantage of that.
Take us back to the beginning of this deal. How did it come about?
Well, I mean, Jesse managed to be the National Rookie of the Year in USMTS. We finished 4th in the points, got some attention. We've been approached by some other car manufacturers, but when we kind of analyzed the whole situation, this was the best option for us to move towards this direction.
Did you approach Harris, or if I hear that right, they came to you guys?
All the deals were deals that were brought to us.
Yeah.
We were completely happy with MB Customs and the quality of the cars and the help we were getting from Jimmy, but this was just a deal that was too good to pass up.
What does this mean for the developmental deal? So as Jesse is moving throughout the season, the things he's going to be finding, he'll be relaying it back to Harris?
That's the grand plan of it all. We're going to, most of the stuff that we discover, if we find something out there that nobody's found yet, which I'm a little skeptical in that regard, but just the same, you see a lot of guys come out of nowhere and, look at Davenport and late model. I never thought in a million years I would see somebody go out there and dominate, in that series with something that obviously was an advantage that wasn't. I mean, they changed all the rules in Lucas Oil Racing, basically to slow him down.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think there's anything quite like that out there, but the opportunity to develop it, we're planning to do 3 to 4 testing sessions during the season, and that's kind of where you're going to get a chance to learn. We're going to rent a racetrack and go and actually test. So that's an opportunity I just couldn't pass up.
Hey, Luke, who's going to be the head wrench on this ride for Jesse?
Well, that precise seat hasn't been filled yet. Temporarily, out of the goodness of his heart, Josh Most is going to go with us on that first series down in Texas, those first 16 races.
Wow, good for Josh.
And I've never really got to know. I finally got to know Josh in the last 6 months, and my impression of him has completely changed from what I observed. Josh had a persona of well, you know what that persona is.
Yeah. We've talked about it about 100 times on the show. When we interviewed Josh, he even talked about it himself, that he is a completely different guy when that helmet comes off and he gets outside of the wheel.
Oh, my gosh. Well, yeah, and not only that, but ultimately, having had a reputation as a rabble-rouser myself, I can kind of relate.
Really? You got that rep? How did that happen?
Yeah, it just came naturally. Like that Bob Seger song, I'm a little bit older and a lot less bolder than I used to.
Yeah. We're talking with Luke Cochran, the head honcho at Home Pride Motorsports and Home Pride Companies, a locally owned and operated company here in Omaha, dealing with roofing, siding, windows, and so much more. How's the roof damming going on right now?
Oh, you mean ice damming?
Yeah, that's it, ice damming.
Yeah, ice damming. We're getting a few calls in regards to that. Most of that is just trying to educate customers how to alleviate their problems with that. Most of it's lack of maintenance. There's so many things people don't understand about their roof, and that's why it says on the side of all our trucks, your roof is the most important component to the biggest investment of your life, your home.
Yeah,
and that's usually the case for most people.
It's
also the most neglected.
Yeah, it is, and I'm dealing with that right now. I'm hoping my roof will hold up until spring comes, and I can get you up there to get some repairs done to it, because I'm tired of dealing with puddles in my living room because of my roof.
Yeah, but the cats like it.
That might be where the puddles are coming from.
Yeah, pray for hail.
Yeah, well, I need to. But that massive amount of rain we got, what was that, September when we got those big rainstorms? The rain doesn't do any damage. It just saturates the roof, and I get leaks.
Yeah.
Anyways, back to...
your roof's pretty susceptible to hail right now, so just pray for hail.
Back to the dirt racing world. Any kind of tricks and stuff you're going to be using. I kind of talk about with the information exchange between you and Harris Chassis that we've talked to another Omaha company, Race Notes, who is Omaha designed and operated. They're dealing a lot with the Sprint Cup world with plans to expand into the dirt world. Are you guys working with them at all to be able to get a digital program to send information back to Harris?
Well, Dave Shaw that used to be at Speedway is now with Harris, and he did up cat drawings of their chassis, and what is utilized mainly in USMTS and more open modifieds is a lift arm as opposed to a pull bar, which is what IMCA requires.
Okay.
So the development of that and the development of having a bolt-in part of the chassis to where we can unbolt and bolt in. We can either run a pull bar or a lift arm, is what most of these cars have anyway. And mostly the development of that, a little bit with brakes, everything that those chassis are getting done with now. I mean, it's all done on cat drawings, and I mean, they're all tubes are bent precisely the same, CNC cut notches. I mean, what Harris is building over there, they're replicating over and over and over. So everything that we try and everything that we learn, they can transmit to other customers that they have. So eventually, this will all make everybody faster than a Harris car.
Yeah, I mean,
and they used to be the king of the walk at USMTS. They've got more, with Shyrock had Harris cars all those years. They got all those championships with him, and they just want to reclaim their place.
Yeah, people don't understand, Luke, that aren't in the racing world there, what jigging these chassis is really all about. I mean, you talk about something being off 1/8 of an inch, it might as well be off 6 miles, because in a race car chassis, that's just a ton, and people don't understand that,
Oh, exactly. I mean, what we're looking for now is some things that I don't think where people have to look is, the geometry of the front end, you got to get it exactly precise, but we're going to start working with the stress points of the tire itself. And especially, the two different, you got a Hoosier tire and you got an American Racer McCurry tire that we run in the USMTS that you can cut, sipe, do all kinds of things. But that is the key. I mean, you got these cars with more than enough horsepower, and along with that, finding that place in the tire I think is where the difference is going to be found. We're also going to develop 525 crate, all aluminum crate motor into the USMTS series. Hopefully we can make that competitive. That remains to be seen, but it's something we're looking at.
And
trying to think outside the box.
And that's what you really got to do in order to unseat somebody that had such a dominant run last year.
Oh, exactly. I mean, you watched the switch. I mean, Rodney Sanders was unbeatable for a period of time, and then it got to where it was right in the hunt, and Jason Hughes just, picked up a couple of tenths. I mean, that's the difference in USMTS series. You're going to these features, and there's maybe 2 tenths from first to last.
Mm-hmm.
So, a couple of tenths it's a ton. So whatever Jason figured out, we'll see if he can carry it into the next year. But we'll see.
Yeah, I know Rodney's season really closed I'd say terrible. I mean, he fell off. He had that rollover, I want to say, up in Wisconsin at Cedar Lake, I think, shortly after the Silver Dollars. He rolled that car that night, and his season from that
was actually 81 Speedway in Wichita. Yeah. They broke the spindles, what they did, and
it was that the video clip I saw where the front tire just came off and folded underneath the car, and he went,
that was 81 Speedway in Wichita. They didn't really hurt the car too bad there, but and they've got a whole arsenal of cars.
Yeah,
and this is one of the reasons that we kind of made the move that we did. Jimmy Mars helped us a lot, and was nothing but a good car owner to us, our car manufacturer. But Rodney's his guy.
Yeah.
So that was one of the biggest reasons we moved. We're moving to Harris because we're going to be Harris's guy.
And you're going to get you're going to get the attention that you really need in order to be more successful.
Yeah, we're their A-team.
Yeah.
So
hey,
that in itself was a pivotal to the decision.
Talk as much as you can. I know there's some stuff that you can't cover because of HIPAA laws, but how's Jesse doing after his surgery?
His surgery went as well as anybody could expect. They actually, what they got to do to him was done orthoscopically. The MRI showed different things. We were expecting, the most extreme possibility was just going to have a couple vertebrae fused, but as it turned out, they just had to trim a little bit off the disc that was pushing on the nerve that was making all the pain.
Mm-hmm.
And, he's still a little hobbled because there's the healing time.
Yep.
But, we were working together in his shop on Sunday, and he was scampering around like the old Jesse.
That's good. That's got to be a bad injury to have, especially sitting in a modified car like that with very little shock and as bumpy as those tracks are.
Well, what it is it's just a lingering pain, and it affects your concentration.
Mm-hmm.
It's his back condition is such that he's going to be in pain probably the rest of his life to some extent, but it's just how much pain.
Yeah.
By the end of the season last year, he was in so much pain. There's a couple of days he couldn't make it out of bed. So that was a concern of mine because I don't care if he ever gets in a race car again, but I do care if he walks again.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So if it came to that, then the decision was going to be easy. But
Talk about the rest of Home Pride Motorsports. You've got the 45 of Dennis Cook. Is he going to be coming back for another season?
Yeah. We help Dennis out. I usually buy him a motor every year. Yep. And, Dennis builds his own cars.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe I can lure him into our stable with a Harris car. We'll see. But ultimately that's kind of his claim to fame is he's winning in his own chassis that he builds in his shop.
Yep.
And that I can't argue with that. Jack's plans for next year are try to repeat 360 champion, the Nebraska 360 series. We're going to run some other races. We're also putting together the possibility of running some shows out on the West Coast.
Okay.
In somebody else's car, but we'll have to kind of see how it comes. Dover time is last minute.
That's absolutely true.
That's just how Jack rolls, and I accept that. So
yeah,
I'll always be there for him.
Last minute's a little early for Jack, really.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, that's it.
If you need help with your roof, head over to homepride.net. Luke and all the experienced guys over there will be able to take care of you. If you need a good time on a Friday or Saturday night, look up Home Pride Motorsports and find out where they're going to be racing. Luke, best of luck this weekend, and it was great talking to you, bud.
Thank you.
And again, Luke Cochran of Home Pride Motorsports joining us on the show to talk about the announcement earlier this week of the 99 team of Jesse Sobbing Racing heading over to Harris Chassis. I think something I didn't really want to push on it because you don't want to insult anybody, but this sounds a lot like when we talked with Tom Ackerman when he made the move from, you're going to have to help me with this, when he went from Brad Keselowski to, no, I think he went from Kyle Busch Motorsports to Brad Keselowski Racing.
No, other way around. He went from Brad Keselowski to Kyle Busch.
And the biggest reason Lee told us, the reason why he moved was because they said that you'll see a Ford engineer at every Ford truck as opposed to a Toyota engineer, one Toyota engineer in the entire garage. He switched.
You're all backwards.
Oh, man.
You're all backwards. There was one Ford engineer because there's only Brad and I think one other team running Ford trucks. So there was one guy for two trucks, where at Toyota there'd be 5 guys for each truck. And they are. The Toyota guys are all over the garage. It's crazy.
Yeah, but he switched from Kyle Busch
to the
Toyota.
Ford. He left the one guy and went to 5.
Okay. I'm sorry. You're right. I got that right in my head now. Should I just re-record that?
No, we're good.
Okay. So, yeah, he went from Ford to Toyota because of the amount of support.
Right,
and it sounds like that was the big appeal for Luke and Jesse and Home Pride Motorsports was to switch to Harris because as good as MB was, they're going to get more attention and more support at Harris.
Well, and Harris was good. Harris has proved that they can be at the top of the heap. Mm-hmm. And as we've talked a million times on this show, is these racers and Luke being a former racer and still does a little bit, but not like he used to.
Yep.
They all have egos.
Mm-hmm.
So when they can be the top guy at the top of the heap, even from the chassis manufacturer, that's a big plus for them.
Absolutely. All right, we got to take a break. We'll come back. Turn number 3 and 4, the Kosiski Auto Parts Legends of the Dirt Series. We'll be focusing on Bob Trostle, so Doug Wolfgang will join us to talk about Bob and his career. We'll be back here on the Front Stretch.
If you love wings, if you love rings, and all kinds of other tempting things, great times, great food, get to Quaker Steak and Lube.
Quaker Steak and Lube is the official watering hole for the Front Stretch and the best place to catch all the NASCAR action today. Open at 11 a.m. with delivery available to Council Bluffs.
Great times, great food, get to Quaker Steak and Lube.
Are you looking to book your next outing? Look no further than Joe's Karting in Council Bluffs. Located just north of Bass Pro Shop, Joe's Karting can handle outings of well over 100-plus people. Bachelor parties, corporate outings, team building, birthday parties, and much more. Give Buddy a call today and reserve your outing. Joe's will even work with local restaurants to cater your event. Book yours today at joeskarting.com. That's karting with a K. It's time to get to Joe's and find out what everyone already knows.
Feather the brake and get back to the gas. Dan and Dirk are headed into turn 3 on the front stretch.
Heading into turn number 3 here on the front stretch. And turn 3 is time for our Kosiski Auto Parts Legends of the Dirt Series. And this year this weekend, we're going to talk about Bob Trostle, who was probably one of the biggest names as far as car owners and manufacturers are concerned in the sprint world. We lost Bob about 3-4 months ago. And so we're having one of his drivers, and probably one of his most successful drivers, if I'm not going out too much on a limb there, Dirk, Doug Wolfgang joining us. The Wolfie, how you doing, sir?
I'm doing good. Thanks for having me.
Well, it's great to talk to you again. We featured you last year as a part of the Legends of the Dirt series, and we had a good time with you. You're a good talker, and that's always a fun thing to hear. So we thought, well, you as being one of the most successful people that sat behind a Bob Trostle manufactured machine and chassis, that you'd be a good guy to talk to us about not just the manufacturer, the mechanic, but also the man that was Bob Trostle. So can you start it off and kind of talk about your getting started with Bob?
Well, for one thing, when I went to drive for Bob in the spring of 1976, what you don't understand is at the moment when I went to drive for him, I hadn't even won a race. I hadn't even won hardly a heat race in a sprint car, and I had won no main events. So I was relatively obscure, totally unknown, other than maybe around the Sioux Falls area where I was from, even though I had moved and lived in Lincoln, Nebraska for a year and a half before that. Mm-hmm. Nobody would have known me. And what they don't understand also is later on when Steve Kinzer went good, everybody thought, well, he was lucky he got to drive for Carl Kinzer, who was widely known as the best sprint car owner mechanic going. And then even nowadays, everybody thinks Donnie Schatz is good, which he is, but they also say, but he drives for Tony Stewart Racing, and Tony Stewart provides him with the best car, and the best mechanics at all times, and he should win. So what was really I don't know why Bob got me to drive at the time, but he had a company, a small company that built race cars, and he needed a welder. And for me, I didn't really know Bob. I just knew he had a car and he was willing to hire me to drive. But what I didn't know was he was the Carl Kinzer before Carl Kinzer, and he was the Tony Stewart Racing before there was Tony Stewart Racing. So virtually, I got into the if not the best car in the Midwest, it was the best car in the Midwest, and it might have been as good as any car in the country without ever winning a race. So I was very lucky as a driver to be able to get with somebody 20 some years older than me that was highly experienced and had a great race car, and I got to drive it right off the bat, and I got to learn from a good guy and and all that at once. I didn't have to struggle more than 1 year of my career, and I got into one of the best cars in the country, so I was very lucky.
Now, Bob actually, he must have had a good eye for talent, even though, like you said, you hadn't won a race yet, but he obviously saw something that he liked.
Well, I could weld at the time, and he knew that, and he knew I needed a car to drive, and he lost his welder, and at the time he had just sold 4 race cars that needed to be put on a container and sent at one time to Australia, and he was supposed to be able to build them in a month, and he lost his welder because he went into business on his own. So he called me, and he said, I know you can weld. Please come and weld, and I'll let you drive my car this season. I know you're all right. You haven't won, but you're all right. And he kept telling me while I was there before the season started and helped him build them, I think, four race cars. He kept saying, man, I hope you can drive like you can weld. And, when you're 21 or 2 years old, I'd always tell him, well, don't worry, Bob. I'm all right at welding, but I'm a hell of a driver. Said, you're going to find out I'm the best you've ever had, you know. Of course, when you're young, if you don't have confidence, you don't have nothing. Well, we went to the first couple of races, and I run off. But then the opening Saturday night at Knoxville of 1976, the first time I went to Knoxville with Bob, I won that Saturday night. He came out on the front straightaway when they were interviewing me. He put his arm around me. He said, son, you ain't lying. And I said, well, lying about what? I didn't know what he meant. He said, you ain't lying. You're a hell of a driver. Let's hit the highway. So we did. And within a few months, you know, within that first summer, I think I won 22 times.
Wow.
So with Bob, or 21 or 22, but we won 7 at Knoxville that first year, which was the most of anybody in one year up until that point. And so, you know, I might have been all right driving. All the thing I know is I was a cocky kid, but I don't think I was that good. He had a good car, and he knew what to do with it most of the time, because I sure as heck didn't.
Do you think you would have been as successful if Bob Trostle had never crossed paths with you?
I don't know that. You're not the first person that's asked me, but, you know, I don't know if Steve Kinser would have been Steve Kinser if he wouldn't have got to get into Carl Kinser's car for the first 15 years of his career. You know, I don't know that.
It's when you talk about ifs and buts, it's really tough when you get into that kind of dicey stuff.
Yeah, it's tough, but it don't really matter.
Yeah,
different buttons don't pay. It don't matter. Yeah.
That's true. What was working with Bob like that when you were welding for him? Were you guys getting to know each other or as friends, or was it more of a boss car owner driver relationship where you guys kept it pretty professional?
No, it wasn't that big a deal. It was just a two-man business. Bob, it was Bob's business, and I just worked for him, and he paid me a certain amount of money each week, and then I got whatever the 40 or I think 40% the first summer and 50% the second summer I drove for him, and to drive, the winnings of the race car. So, my major money was driving the race car, but we got to know each other by hanging around each other all day long, every day, and in some cases that was good, and in some cases it was bad. You wear each. I have a tendency to wear people out when I'm around them too much, and which I did with several of the mechanics and car owners that I drove for after Bob, and because I was just an idiot. I was 100% wanting to win, and nothing mattered to me, and I was willing to do anything to do it. And so I wore people out. But Bob, I didn't wear him out yet. At the time, I was with him too bad, and we didn't have too much trouble. He didn't mind. That's one thing I liked about Bob. He was willing to let you be who you were. As long as you were ready to drive his car, he didn't care. He didn't really care about things that he didn't have no control of. He just wanted you to be ready to drive the race car, and that was all. So
he wasn't too overbearing?
No, not at all.
What was he like when you came off the track and maybe you'd run second or third and you were doing everything possible to get past the next driver, and you said...
spun out leading?
Yeah. Spun out leading, that's a whole different category there.
Yeah. No, the first or second, second or third or fourth, I don't remember him even being grumpy with me because of that so much. I know that I made several mistakes, especially because I was still learning to race myself, and I think he probably knew you were going to make mistakes going into it. And besides that, he had a lot of good guys drive for him, but at that point he had raced probably 15 years. I don't know how long before me, 10 or 15 years. He'd had pretty good cars, but he never really had a driver that set in him steadily enough to win, 15, 20 times. And the first year I drove for him, I won 21 or 2 times. So in other words, we probably only won 1 out of every 4, because I think we raced 90 or 95 starts. But even so, we won more than the rest of the guys, so we were winning more often than before. And the next year, the second year, we won 45 main events out of the about 90 or 95, the same amount. So he was, when you're winning that much, you're not going to run into too much trouble.
Yeah, where I was going to go, though, is if you come in, after running a second or a third, and, he could tell you were fighting it out there, trying to get by and trying for that win. If you came in and mentioned to him, if the car could only do this, or if the car only had a little bit more here, the right front stuck a little harder, or the left front did something, or whatever, how soon would he get to work on that?
Immediately. The car that I was sitting in the seat, he told me about it from the beginning, that the car was mine to do what I wanted to do with it.
Wow.
And there were several times, of course, at the time, I didn't know nothing to do with it. I didn't know what to do with it. Like I said, I was lucky. I got into a car that actually did it right most of the time. And then I could teach myself how to drive, how to go through the corners, how to run the cushion, how to run the slick, because the car wasn't too bad most of the time. And then when I suggested things, he'd say, well, I'm not sure that's going to be it, but we'll do it. And then when it didn't work, he'd say, yeah, it still don't work. He didn't say, you dummy, I told you that, But, so he was, at that moment, he was fairly receptive to do anything. And it worked out pretty good. And we were both learning about a lot of different things. And we learned together, so we didn't really. There wasn't too much grumbling or
disagreements.
You dummy, disagreements on that kind of stuff.
Or placing blame. I met Bob. Yeah. I met Bob last spring. It was in April at a racer reunion over at Pleasantville, Iowa, that Kevin Presky from the Midwest Dirt Track Legends put on. And I actually it's the first time I'd met the man, and I got to talk to him a little bit. And he did seem like somebody that would be willing to try about anything to make a car win a race.
Yeah, I'm sure he was set in his own way on a lot of things, but racing is constantly changing. It's not, in any of the racing, whether it's NASCAR or Indy cars or short track cars, it's constantly evolving. And if you don't keep up with the evolution, you're going to be left behind. And in Bob's case, he understood that it was that way.
I'm sure the guys that had driven for him later in his career, if they might have suggested something, he probably had a notebook a foot and a half thick and had just turned a couple pages and say, no, we tried that in 1980 and that didn't work.
Exactly. And I went through that with him too. I mean, he would say, I'd say, let's do this. And he said, well, hell, it didn't work last year. It didn't work 3 years ago, and it sure as hell didn't work 7 years ago. So why do we even want to try it? Well, we did try it, and it didn't work again, and then we just wrote it down saying it was junk, just the way it is. So,
but some of those things are worth coming back and trying again because, like you talked about, the evolution of the chassis and the driving styles and the tracks and the tires, something could have changed to now it would work.
Yeah, because it was changing, and we did have disagreements on some of that stuff as it changed, but we learned together, and then once we kind of learned or figured it out, we were either happy we did or snickering because the other guys didn't know it, and so we just it was just that way. It wasn't so much him against me. We were pitted together. We were trying to do the best we could. When I suggested something, I wasn't trying to lose the race, and when he told me about the way it probably could be, he wasn't trying to tell me that because he didn't want me to try it. He was just telling me he didn't think it was going to be that way. So prove me wrong and show me.
Yeah.
So I either did or I didn't.
Was it a big advantage having a car owner also as kind of an engineer and a mechanic who was designing these things?
Oh, well, I didn't know it at the time, but like I said, nowadays these drivers get in these cars. First of all, you're not going to get in one that you can get hired to drive. You're going to have to buy it yourself. There's hardly any hired cars, so, and nowadays the motors are 50, 60,000 and plus 30 for the car. So you got $100,000 sitting there before you even hit the track. And there's no 18, 19, 20-year-old kid got that kind of money.
Yeah. That's before you hit the highway to get to the track. You got to have something to get it there too.
Right. So it's totally different now. So at the time, when I drove for him, like I said, I was just lucky to get in the car. But what I didn't understand at all until later on was how lucky I was to get into a car that was A1, and he was willing to work with you. It was just luck. And then, and then 3, 4, 5 years after that, the evolution of the race car went beyond Bob. It got too expensive. It got too technical. And he knows that. We all know that. He couldn't keep up with it. And then I went down the road and went driving for other people until the end of my career. But that didn't mean we weren't friends. He kind of got aced out because of money, and that was 25, 30 years ago, and now we're all aced out because of money. It's totally different.
Yeah.
So
when you talk about that money aspect of it, before he kind of started to get phased out and, like you said, aced out of it all, was he willing to spend the dollars to be able to have the advantage, or was he more of a thrifty car owner?
No, he wasn't thrifty, but in those days, people didn't understand about spending dollars. It hadn't evolved to that yet. We would buy a right rear tire and run it at Knoxville on Saturday nights, buff it on a buffing machine, and run it on Sunday nights in Minneapolis, and then we would hot lap on it the next Friday night wherever we would race. Well, nowadays, you got to have 3 brand new right rears to run those tracks. And that's just the way it is. But it hadn't evolved into that yet. And what evolution there was, we were on the cutting edge of the revolution.
I know. I grew up with the late models out of good old Sunset Speedway, and I remember when I started reading about World Outlaws guys starting to put in the titanium bolts and all that kind of stuff.
Uh-huh.
And, it trickled down to late models eventually, but I just remember how crazy that was. You guys are going out and spending thousands of dollars just on the bolts for your race car because, you had no weight rules or anything for the longest time.
Right, yeah.
So.
Well, they didn't. And then that's something that we done at that time, too, even back in 1977. We couldn't afford to, we sat down after the 76 season and talked between ourselves and said, what can we do to get better? And the first thing I said is we need bigger, better, badder motors, and that was cool, except he couldn't afford them.
Yeah.
So the next thing is we want to build a lighter car so that it could be accelerated quicker with what motor we had. Well, he built a lighter car, and in those days it was 500 pounds, not 5 pounds, but 500 lighter than anybody else. So we had a distinct advantage in 145 races because of that. But then as time evolved, the next 2 to 3 years, everybody had 1,500-pound cars instead of 2,000-pound cars. And then we were all equal again, and the next guy that got the next jump was going ahead then, the motor or wherever it went.
That year, year the 145 races, I think that was the 77 season. Did you have a lot of guys over in your pits kind of sneaking peeks at what changes you made to your chassis and how you ended up lightening that car up?
Yeah, but in those days, guys built cars. There were very few. Bob was a car builder, and he built 20, 25 cars a year. Nowadays, like Maxim and J&J and them guys, Eagle, they'll build 100, 150, 200 cars a year like nothing. Mm-hmm. So most of the race cars in those days were hand-built cars at home, and people build them and they raced them all year long. If they crashed them, they took them apart, fixed them up, rebuilt them, painted them, and went back to the track again. Nowadays, they crash, they throw them away and put a new chassis under it. It's a different way of doing it.
Yeah.
So when those guys would come after that car got brought out, when they would come by and look at that car, they could look all they want, but they couldn't make their car be like mine by the next weekend. In fact, it was going to take a year for them to get going. They were with what they had.
Yeah. We've been talking with Doug Wolfgang as a part of the Legends, the Kosiski Auto Parts Legends of the Dirt series. We're talking Bob Trostle all for the rest of the show, and we've got about 10 minutes left in the show, so let's take a quick break. We'll come back and wrap it all up in turn number 4. We'll be back here on the front stretch.
We have all been there before. Broken car part in your hand and some snot-nosed punk behind the counter has no idea what he's talking about, but he guarantees that this part will fix your car. You pay an arm and a leg for the replacement, get it home, and sure enough, it doesn't fit your car. Now, learn from your mistake and give an experienced salesperson at Kosiski Auto Parts a call today at 402-731-4592. Kosiski Auto Parts will get you back on the road with your arms and legs still attached.
Joe's Karting in Council Bluffs has taken a page out of IMCA's rulebook and gone crate. These brand new low-emission engines will still have you white-knuckling it all through the Metro's fastest indoor facility. Joe's Karting is now friendly for all skill levels with their brand new Honda-powered engines. It's time to get to Joe's today and find out what drivers like Jack Dover, Shaylee Bate, and Andrew Kosiski have known for years. Located in Council Bluffs and online at joeskarting.com. That's karting with a K.
It's checkers or wreckers as we enter turn 4 on the front stretch, presented by Joe's Karting in Council Bluffs.
Just about ready to wrap the show up here for the Kosiski Auto Parts Legends of the Dirt Series. The front stretch, as always, presented by Joe's Karting. If you missed any part of today's show, you can head over to YouTube channel and check out the replays of all the shows brought to you by Creative Elements. And today's show, as a part of the Kosiski Auto Parts Legends of the Dirt Series, we're talking a lot about Bob Trostle and his impact in dirt racing. And one of the guys who made found victory lane a lot racing for Bob Trostle is Doug Wolfgang. The Wolfie is joining us here on the show today. We got a few minutes left in turn number 4. So, Doug, I want to talk about the middle part and the end of your time with Bob Trostle and the decision to move on. What was that like?
My first decision to move on was easy because at the time I didn't really think about. The only reason I wanted to drive sprint cars was I wanted to be an IndyCar driver, and at the time. When I was in high school in 67, 8, 9, 70, that in those days the IndyCar drivers came from sprint car tracks. So I live up here in South Dakota, and I don't know nothing about nothing. So I'd go to the library and get the Indianapolis Star newspaper, and I find out these guys learn their trade driving sprint cars. So I thought to myself, the only reason I want to drive sprint cars is to learn how to drive win, and then I'll get an IndyCar drive, I'll make $1 million, and I'll be famous, and it'll be over with. That'll be
Just
my
like
career. Yeah, it'd be pretty easy, I thought, especially since there was at least one track in South Dakota, the South Dakota State Fair in Huron, that had sprint cars, and I had seen them. I said, hell, I can get there. That's only 2 hours from home. But other than that, I didn't know what a sprint car was. So my goal all along was when I first got into racing at home and driving open wheel modifieds was to get into a sprint car, then to win the biggest race in the country. And in my mind, the biggest race in the country was the Knoxville Nationals. So if I won the Knoxville and I don't know if it is, but in my mind it was, if I won that race, surely Roger Penske would call me the following morning and hire me. Well, so when I won the Knoxville Nationals with Bob Trostle in 1977, I can't even remember it. And some of the reasons I can't remember that race that much is because I wasn't focused so much on winning that race as I was what I was going to do with my life after I won that race. And so when Bill Smith, the Speedway, called me that fall and asked me to come drive his sprint car and that he would try to help me get an Indy car to drive, when he said that, I was sold. That was enough right there. So I quit Bob Trostle after 2 years of winning, 70 main events, about 65, 70 main events, and never thought nothing about it. But of course, it ain't as easy to get one of them Indy cars to drive as what you would think it would be. And by the time I won a sprint car race, they were all rear engine cars anyway. And so what you learn in a sprint car has nothing to do with IndyCar racing, and it was pretty easy to figure that out, But since I had read the rule book in 1966, by the time 1976 rolled around, the rules had changed. And so that, for me, I just put my head into the ground and worked my butt off trying to get there. And once I thought I'd get there, and when Bill Smith said that to me, I thought I was going to make it. Well, it's easy to say that stuff, but to come up with sponsors and to be get everything organized is a different story, and it never happened.
Did Bob Was there any hard feelings when you decided to leave and go race for Bill Smith, or was Bob pretty supportive of it?
He wouldn't have had no hard feelings with me, because he knew I was into I wanted to go to IndyCar racing and stuff. But his hardest feelings was I went to drive for Bill Smith, because that was his nemesis in the Midwest. Yeah. Yep. And then later on, I came back and drove for Bob several times on several different occasions.
Anything consistent as like a season, or did you go off and just kind of race a couple of off shows?
I came back in 1979 after being with Bill Smith, and I raced for the year in 78. I came back with Bob for half the season in 79, and then I quit driving for him again because we just weren't doing that good. Well, we were all right, but his motors blew up, and he understood that. He needed to go home and get organized again. And I ended the season, the second half, with Bill Smith again, and I won a bunch of races with them at the end of the year. And then the following year, I started out leading the World of Outlaws in points, even with Bill Smith, and he quit. And I ended up driving for Bob for about a month or a month and a half, and he decided he didn't want to go to the bigger, travel around that much. And then, so I drove for him and won a couple races with him right away. And then later on, I would drive for him a couple nights in a row here or there, because we lived out in the Midwest here, and I ended up driving for different people that didn't live so close. Their cars were kept in Pennsylvania or wherever, Tennessee or wherever. And when I was at home on weekends off or whatever, I would drive Bob's car now and then.
I've been told that Bob's a big reason why sprint car racing got to be so popular in Australia and why we're seeing so many Australians in sprint racing today. Did you ever work with him about going overseas and racing in Australia?
No, I did not. He didn't go there until after I was done driving for him the first times. He went about about the start of the 80s. And by that time, I had been down there one winter already. And it didn't take me one winter to realize that after you race over 100 starts a year, for me, I needed to go home and not race another 15 or 20 times over 2 months in Australia. I just couldn't stand it. I liked the racing fine, but I wanted to come home and
recharge.
Recharge up a little bit. And it was better for me when I did.
Yeah, I know you told us at the beginning there when you first went to work for Bob, it was 76, and you needed to weld some chassis up for him so he could send them over to Australia. And
right.
I know when we talked with Shane Carson here a couple weeks ago, and I think he said he went over there with one of Bob's cars in 79, I think was the year he told us he went.
Yep, that could be the first year. I know I went in 79. No, Shane would have been the next year. Okay. I went in the winter of 79 and 80, and he went in the winter of 80 and 81, I believe. Okay. And so,
Doug, what was your? Go ahead.
No, that's all right.
What was your relationship like with Bob after you both had retired? Did you guys get together and kind of still share some old racing stories and have a good time, or?
Yeah. Yeah, Bob was one of the bigger influences on my life early on. I mean, he really taught me a lot about work ethic and, different things, not only how to win, but, how to win right, how to win, don't be a butthead, he did a lot, and I always admired that. My dad died a long time ago, about 1995, I think, and ever since that, I used to tell Bob, he's like my dad. I talked to him a lot, Yep.
Well, we've been talking with the Wolfie. Doug Wolfgang is a part of the Bob Trostle show for the Kosiski Auto Parts Legends of the Dirt Series. Doug, we'll let you get started with your weekend. We apologize for taking so much of your time and calling in a little bit late, but thanks so much for talking with us.
Yeah, no sweat. I'll talk to you later.
All right, have a good one, Doug.
Thanks, Doug.
Yep, bye.
And that's going to do it for us today, as we are going to wrap up today's Front Stretch show presented by Joe's Karting in Council Bluffs. If you missed any part of the interviews, head over to the YouTube page, courtesy of Creative Autos or Creative Element. They throw up our YouTube replays every weekend at about 10 a.m. on Sunday morning, so you can catch the whole interviews. If you happen to miss turn number 1 as we were talking NASCAR news and notes, turn 2 as we talked with Luke Cochran of Home Pride Motorsports, or turns 3 and 4 with Doug Wolfgang, you can catch it all on the YouTube page. Have a great weekend, everybody. We'll be back next weekend to do it all over again. This has been The Front Stretch, presented by Joe's Karting on AM 590, Omaha's ESPN Radio.
If you love wings, if you love rings, and all kinds of other tempting things, great times, great food, get to Quaker Steak and Lube.
Quaker Steak and Lube is the official watering hole for the front stretch and the best place to catch all the NASCAR action today. Open at 11 a.m. with delivery available to Council Bluffs.
Great times, great food, get to Quaker Steak and Lube.
Are you looking to book your next outing? Look no further than Joe's Karting in Council Bluffs. Located just north of Bass Pro Shop, Joe's Karting can handle outings of well over 100 plus people. Bachelor parties, corporate outings, team building, birthday parties, and much more. Give Buddy a call today and reserve your outing. Joe's will even work with local restaurants to cater your event. Book yours today at joeskarting.com. That's karting with a K. It's time to get to Joe's and find out what everyone already knows.